I just want to say thank you for being here this morning for this brief update related to COVID and our schools. As expected, the past few days have been challenging for school districts as we've seen a surge in COVID-19 cases within our community. Despite the difficulties, our schools remain safe places to learn. And we remain dedicated to remaining open for in-person learning. As I said over the break, the transition to remote learning would be a last resort for school districts. However, the challenges that we're facing right now related to staffing are very real, and they need to be taken seriously. But I hope that our communities know that we're doing everything in our power to remain open for in-person learning, and we're very appreciative for the efforts of our school personnel across the county. So having said that, I'll open it up for your questions. So I think that you'll see some variation district by district, but I think that we're in a much better place in terms of our use of technology and remote learning and the access that we can give students to classrooms so that we can keep students up to speed. I also think that it's going to be interesting to see what happens with New York State's adoption of CDC recommendations, which will shorten isolation and quarantine orders to get students back in person. It's also, you know, the state has taken some helpful steps. Test to Stay has been a success. Most Monroe County districts are implementing that practice, and that's helped us to limit quarantine numbers and keep healthy students who have been potentially exposed in school. So that's been a help as well. You said you had a second question there? Yeah, we've seen an increased number, obviously, like other districts across the county, in the percentages of students testing positive, and we've seen a wave of staff members testing positive as well. Currently, about 7% of our staff were out with COVID-related issues, either in isolation or quarantining, taking care of family members that are ill. Having said that, you know, our student attendance has remained somewhat consistent when we compare it to where we were a month ago. You know, we've stayed within 5 or 6% of where we were in December, but you know, we are seeing increased numbers across the board, and you know, related to staffing, our ability to get students to and from school, our ability to serve students meals, and our ability to have teachers in classrooms has been significantly diminished. We are doing everything that we can to use the resources that we have to consolidate bus routes, to shift personnel, sometimes between buildings. In many cases, we are using intervention teachers, librarians, paraprofessionals to help supervise classrooms. In the transportation center, we have members of the department there that's in charge of dispatch. Our head drivers are out driving to cover routes. So, and that's not unique to Rush Henrietta. That's what's happening all across the county because we're all committed to making sure that our schools are open for in-person learning. Yeah, I think everybody is walking a razor thin line right now. I think it's important to say that. And I think it's important that our communities know the measures that school districts are taking so that we're open for in-person learning every day. It's not our preference to transition to remote learning. We're trying to stay open, but I also want people to understand just how serious these issues are and just how thin the margin of error is there for districts right now.
Well, speaking of which, I wanted to ask about sort of what the thresholds are. You've made it perfectly clear that your number one priority is to keep schools open, but there are parents whose kids are now sent into quarantine or isolation for 10 days. They don't really have remote options. Are there some discussions happening about even hybrid options while we get through this surge to ensure that kids still maintain some level of education during all this?
No, there hasn't been any talk of a hybrid option at this point for a variety of reasons. But I think what you'll see across the county is you'll see school districts hang on as long as we possibly can because it's going to be a storm for the next few weeks. We know that. And you'll see districts do everything that they can, utilizing every single resource that they have to try and remain open. School districts obviously are prepared to make the transition to remote learning because we've had to do that off and on over the course of the past 2 years, and we've actually become pretty good at it. But we also know that the best thing for kids is for them to be in school for in-person learning. So we're committed to that, but I don't think that you're going to see any school districts revert back to a hybrid model. What you may see, Jennifer, is a situation where, I know if I had to take a first step here in Rush Henrietta and wade back into the waters of remote learning, I would look to do it at the secondary level first so that younger learners would be able to continue in-person learning so that it wouldn't create a situation for parents where they had childcare issues, hopefully. And I think our secondary students are much more equipped to handle remote learning opportunities. So if we had to go that route here in Rush Henrietta, that would be the first step that I would look at before I put everybody on remote learning.
And I got the chance to ask, I just have one follow-up, then I'll step back. I got the chance to ask the governor about this the other day, and she said they're sort of fine-tuning this. I know that the test to stay rules changed when the state put their guidelines out, that you could only test to stay kids who were exposed in school. How are you handling that? It seems sort of counterintuitive to me. All we've heard from you all is that transmission isn't that bad in school, it's sort of outside of school. So have you had to dramatically decrease the number of kids you are testing to stay because of that change? And are you looking for it to be changed back?
It will be interesting to see what happens going forward related to that change. We're following the state guidelines. We've been in constant communication with our local Department of Health, and they're aware of our feelings around that. But I can only speak for myself related to test to stay. We've seen decreased numbers of students coming in for testing this week, but I don't attribute that to the change in the guidance.
Meaning just their parents are not sending them?
Well, I think because we're just coming off of the break, I think there's going to be a lag. And then I think you'll see the numbers pick up.
Hi, Bo, Dan Schrack, 13 WAM News. Thanks for taking time out of your day to speak with us. My question here, I'm really wondering, obviously there is the need for families to send their children to school. A lot of parents work, have day jobs, things of that nature. But one has to wonder, what is the sort of education students are getting if they're walking into their Chem 2 class and the librarian is the sub?
Well, I think that principals and district administrators try to be really thoughtful about where you're placing teachers and how we're utilizing substitute teachers or how you're utilizing folks in the building. As I said before, I commend our school administrators, our teachers, and our staff members, because I think despite the circumstances around us, the quality of what our students receive each and every day has remained at a high level. We have some of the very best school districts, not just in New York State, but in the country, in this county. And we have all stepped up to make sure that our kids and families are supported, during these tumultuous weeks, and we're going to continue to do so. So I'm very confident in the quality of instruction that you're seeing in our classrooms, despite the challenges. And like I said, we're just going to have to continue to get creative and work together here over the course of the next few weeks. But as I said in the very beginning, districts are very, very thin right now related to staffing. This isn't an issue related to health and safety in schools. When we have this conversation around the transition possibly to remote learning, this is a conversation that's directly related to the labor shortage.
So what is that threshold then? What is the point where you say, you know what, we don't have enough warm bodies at this point to monitor these classrooms, not even just teach, but just monitor these classrooms? Where do districts draw the line to say we have to go remote? We have no other option.
Yeah, it's not that simple as saying here's the line where we would transition to remote. I think it depends, and I think that you'll see districts take a more nuanced approach. You might see a building that has to go remote for a couple of days, or you might see a specific program where we have to make some adjustments with transportation, because it's not just about, do you have enough bodies in your building to supervise and to safely operate on a daily basis. A lot of the shortages that are impacting districts, I know that that was one of the factors in the city's transition is bus drivers. And so I think if you get to that point where you can't get students to and from school in a way that safely makes sense, if you can't operate a building, then that's when you have to consider making that transition to remote learning. But it's not real clean and it's not real clear. There is no specific threshold where you say, if you hit this particular threshold, then we're going to close down. It's going to depend on a variety of factors, and it's going to vary district by district based on infection rates and the capacity that you have.
All right, thank you.
Hi, Bo. It's James Brown, WXXI. Earlier, you mentioned that you had no interest in hybrid education going back there. What are the drawbacks on it, and why would you not consider it at this point?
Yeah, it was a very complicated model to implement, and as I said before, I know that I speak for all superintendents when I say that we want kids physically in school. We're committed to that. I think a hybrid model would simply muddy the waters. The other thing to note is this is a very different scenario than we were in during those times when we were implementing hybrid models. And so, we're looking at trying to get through a tumultuous month. So the hope is that the situation and improves if we can just weather the storm for the next few weeks. So we're gonna try to keep kids in school. We're not seeing, despite the surge in cases within the community, we're not seeing significant increases of school-based spread. So we want our students here, and in the event that we had to transition, then we would look at different remote options. But like I said, that would be a last resort.
Thank you.
Hi there, this is Wendy Wright at
My
Spectrum.
cousin.
I know, right? So I wanted to ask you, can you just explain your communication process and how you guys are all talking with the superintendents and maybe how you're supporting each other, how frequently you're communicating, and if at some point do you see any districts backing each other up?
How do you mean backing each other up?
Well, I know everybody's short-staffed, but is there any district that might be in a better position than maybe another one? Or is there one district that's more on the brink than another one right now?
I think, all districts are really tight right now. Some districts are tighter than others. I don't think there's any district in the county that's in a position where they can lend staff to other districts, whether it be drivers or teachers or paraprofessionals. We collaborate and communicate with one another on almost a daily basis at this point. We have a really strong group of superintendents, a really talented group of superintendents, a really hardworking group of superintendents, and everyone is supportive of one another. This is a challenging time for all of us. So we're going to continue to work together. We're trying to keep our communities informed as developments take place. Here in Rush Henrietta, we put out communication to our families last night, just letting them know that hey, we're still committed to in-person learning, but the issues that we're facing are very real, and you need to be prepared accordingly if we have to, out of necessity, transition to remote learning. So we'll continue to make sure that families have the information that they need going forward, and that's not just true of Rush Henrietta, but that's true of districts across the county.
And I wanted to ask you about, you keep saying, and so do other officials that we've been talking to, that this is a last resort to go to remote. And the reasons aren't just because of convenience for parents and that sort of thing. It's what we've learned over the last couple of years, the impact this has had, not just on learning, but on mental health and how this affects students moving forward. Is that something you can talk about and describe for people who may not really understand the impact this has had? And I was talking with a child student therapist who just said, even talk of going remote again can be triggering for students. So, I mean, for people who really maybe don't get that it's not just a logistical thing, that this is the severity of this is pretty significant.
Oh, I would completely agree with that. When we talk about remaining open because it's best for kids, it's not just an instructional conversation. It's a conversation about student mental health, and it's a conversation about, social emotional wellness as well. I think we've seen, since we've been back, the impact that the pandemic has had on student behavior, on their levels of anxiety. And you're right, when we have these conversations about transitioning back to remote learning, it's stressful for us as adults. I can say that as a parent myself, but it's incredibly stressful for our kids. And so when I say that we're committed to remaining open, it's true. All of us are doing everything that we can within our schools to make sure that we can remain open for our kids.
And then one last thing, I think, you know, when everybody's saying kind of what's that threshold, and I know there's so many different, you know, processes and different options the schools might have, but how close are we? I mean, is any district, I mean, are we looking at the possibility of schools closing next week? Or, I mean, are we that close?
So I'm not going to use the word closing, because even in the thick of the pandemic, when our students weren't physically here, teachers and administrators were doing an awful lot of work to make sure that students had what they need instructionally, and we're supporting them from a social emotional learning standpoint. We were just doing it in a very different way. I think, as I said before, schools are doing everything that they can, but we are razor thin as far as staffing goes. I think, you know, this was a really difficult week, and I think that it's a good sign that most of us have been able to weather the storm and continue to be open for in-person learning. You know, speaking for what I've seen in Rush Henrietta, our numbers of unfilled vacancies look a little bit better today. So I think that's a sign of hope than they were yesterday. So I think this is going to be a rocky period for all school districts, but thus far we've been able to weather the storm, and hopefully we'll continue we'll be able to continue to do so.
Thank you.
Well, vaccination status factors into that conversation. And then also when students are symptomatic. You know, if a student is vaccinated and they aren't symptomatic, then we're able to take them back to school. In the event that they aren't vaccinated and they aren't symptomatic, then we can work them through the test to stay protocol, and again we can readmit them to school. I think the waters have been muddied a little bit just because of the sheer volume of cases that the county is seeing. So the contact tracing protocol is probably a bit more difficult for them than it's been prior to the holiday break, because we haven't seen a surge like the one that we're currently seeing right now at any point in the pandemic. All right. If there are no more questions, then I'm going to step off. I hope that everyone has a good day, and I'm sure we'll be talking soon.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
both for your time. Much appreciated.
All right. Take care.